This motion picture deals with the subject of AIDS and human sexuality. In preparing this program, the producers have selected the least explicit material possible. However, some people may find this information offensive, therefore viewer discretion is advised.
There is a killer in our midst. It is one of the most serious health problems that we have ever faced. It threatens our very existence. It is AIDS. Because America's leaders have refused to track the disease, it's hard to know how many are infected. Estimates range somewhere between 2 and 10 million. So far, the male homosexual community has been attacked the hardest. Many are unaware that they are contagious and continue to infect others with this fatal virus. Thousands of hemophiliacs, blood transfusion recipients, and intravenous drug abusers have also died. And with aggressive rapidity, AIDS is now preying on our heterosexual population. At present, there is no cure for AIDS.
AIDS is an acronym standing for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. It's a clinical diagnosis of the end stage of a viral infection with human immune deficiency virus.
What you're looking at is the known causative agent of the disease AIDS. This is the HIV-1 virus. It's a very interesting organism, and it's uniquely designed to live successfully in a cell.
Once somebody is infected with the human immunodeficiency virus, the virus attacks certain kinds of white blood cells which are critical to the immune system. When that happens, the person develops what we call immune deficiency. And when people have immune deficiency, they become susceptible to a whole variety of very serious infections and even some kinds of cancers that people with normal immune systems would not be susceptible to.
When the virus gets into the bloodstream, immediately it starts looking for a particular type of white blood cell that is the master control of our defense mechanism in the body.
Well, certain kinds of white blood cells called T cells are really the central element in our immune response and our ability to combat a whole variety of infections. Once these cells are knocked out by the AIDS virus, then we become susceptible to many serious conditions.
Once the virus has attached to the specific type of white cell, the CD4 lymphocyte, then the virus penetrates the cell, duplicates its genetic material, which is then added to the genetic material of the lymphocyte. Now, lymphocytes exist for long periods of time within the body. Therefore, it's felt that once infection has occurred with this virus, that the infection, or at least the potential for reactivation of the infection, is lifelong.
Infection by retroviruses is permanent. Once you are infected, you never lose it. You never lose it because the genetic material of the virus becomes incorporated into the genetic material of the cell that's parasitized.
The AIDS virus tricks the body into making an antibody that essentially does nothing to kill the virus that's floating around in your blood.
Once the patient acquires human immune deficiency virus, the patient will feel well for several years. The incubation period from onset of viral infection to the development of symptoms ranges from 3 to 7 years and may, in fact, be longer than that.
People can have the virus and be infectious for 7, 8, 9 years, and the disease state not be shown. I think it's only a matter of getting enough years history, and we'll probably find out that people can be infected a lot longer before they really start developing symptoms of the disease.
Someone who's infected with the AIDS virus may be completely free of any symptoms. He may be, strong, vigorous, and in very good health, even though he's infected with this virus.
Many people with AIDS appear healthy. However, they are contagious and can infect others. Every carrier of the virus will eventually become susceptible to life-threatening diseases.
AIDS means that this person has severe opportunistic illnesses, meaning illnesses that are seen only when the immune system in the body is malfunctioning. These opportunistic illnesses are very, very difficult to treat, and the mortality, therefore, from these illnesses is very high.
AIDS itself is really the end stage of this infection. Generally, the individual that is in this end stage does not die of AIDS itself, dies from some other, generally opportunistic disease that normally would not bother them.
A couple months ago, my life took a drastic change. I was admitted into a hospital and told I had pneumocystis pneumonia.
Infection, a form of pneumonia caused by pneumocystis carinii, which is an opportunistic protozoan parasite. It's very, very common.
I went into the hospital June 9th with pneumocystis pneumonia, which is what 62% of all AIDS patients come down with first.
I've had pneumocystic pneumonia, and I've had 3 different types of cancer.
Since then, I have been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and now I have a lesion in my brain called toxo. I also have a lesion in my intestines. I have neuropathy in my feet, my legs, and a fear of many other things happening.
Then they found the cryptococcus in August, and they cut my lung open.
One of the situations is a Kaposi's sarcoma, a type of cancer that affects the capillaries and of the particularly on the surface of the skin, and will develop these purple blotches and potentially lesions on the extremities.
I have Kaposi's sarcoma. That's the disease that has the lesions. I don't have them on my face, I have them on my body.
These spots that are on my arm right here, these are called Kaposi's sarcoma.
This particular cancer in a patient who has AIDS is a very aggressive malignant disease, usually fatal within months to a year's time.
These lesions eventually spread down here to my feet. This starts to work like a tourniquet if you grow lesions on the other side.
There can be lesions of mucous membranes. There can be a variety of yeast infections affecting these individuals. Inflammation of the spinal column, meningitis, or the brain, encephalitis.
Before I was even out of the hospital, I came down with fungal meningitis, which I still have, and for which there is no cure for me. And I've had blood transfusions, 4 CAT scans, ultrasound, dialysis. My kidneys failed for a while because of the medication. I've had a couple brain surgeries.
In addition to its capability of knocking out the immune system and predisposing the patient to unusual opportunistic infections, it can directly infect clearly the central nervous system, and which includes the brain, and cause serious damage there.
AIDS can also seek out certain brain cells and can selectively grow in them as well. And an individual can walk around with a progressive form of brain disease that results in dementia, basic inability to function mentally, and all other symptoms can be absent.
People may get signs of dementia, personality changes, losses of memory, difficulty in calculating figures and this type of thing, because the virus will infect the brain, cause inflammation and disruption of neurologic function.
Several months ago, the federal government began to classify these individuals with AIDS-caused dementia as full-blown AIDS. And overnight, the population of AIDS individuals in this country rose 20%, just by a change in classification.
Once you have the full-blown AIDS entity, then it is clearly 100% fatal. 80% of people will be dead within 2 years.
If you get AIDS, you're in big trouble. You are not going to live very long being a matter of months or years. And that's what's scary about AIDS.
And I've taken care of many patients with AIDS, and it is a disease that will take a healthy robust individual and literally make skeletons out of them in a short period of time. A very devastating illness.
Jim was, I don't know, he's a big guy, you know, and this is a man that really literally just disintegrated in front of my eyes, and it was real sad to see somebody just kind of shrivel into nothing.
What most concerns me about this disease, AIDS, is that so far there's no cure. So far no one has survived the full-blown AIDS disease. This may very well be the next plague to go across our planet.
This virus can be spread in one of three ways. It can be spread sexually from men to women, from women to men, and also between men. It can be spread by exposure to blood, for example, through drug abusers sharing needles or receiving transfusion. And it can be spread from mother to newborn child. We know, for example, that there are people who received a single unit of infected blood who became infected themselves. We know of people who probably were infected through a single episode of sexual contact.
It's conceivable that one virus particle can cause disease.
Most AIDS patients in this country are either homosexual or bisexual men or intravenous drug abusers. We have a smaller number of AIDS patients who have hemophilia, have been transfusion recipients, or have been the heterosexual partners of people infected with the virus. We don't know why it happened that homosexual men and drug abusers were exposed to the AIDS virus early into the epidemic. But once that happened, the virus spread very rapidly in those populations. We know that gay men who had multiple partners and who were participating in certain sexual practices were very efficient at spreading the virus to their sex partners.
I've been diagnosed for 5 years as of Monday with the wasting syndrome, which falls under the AIDS diagnosis. I just had a lover that died of AIDS in January of this year.
Yes, I'm part of the gay community. I'm also a recovering IV drug user.
We know that needle sharing is very common for IV drug abusers, and that's a very efficient way to spread the virus.
I got AIDS through IV drug use. I was diagnosed in January of '87.
1 to 4 million people in America have the virus. Nobody knows for sure because we haven't been reporting them. 90% of those with the virus don't know they have it.
We have a large pool of infected individuals out there that no one knows who and where they are. And they are continuing to spread this disease without even being aware they're doing that.
Quite honestly, I just met him yesterday. He's from Detroit and I'm from Los Angeles, and we're just enjoying the warm weather.
A moderately active homosexual can average 30 to 50 different sexual partners a year. Indulgent homosexuals who frequent gay resorts or bathhouses can be involved in sexual orgies with 10 to 15 partners a night, resulting in more than 500 sexual partners a year. Rather than eliminating all sexual behavior, safe sex propaganda promotes the notion that a homosexual can diminish the risk of catching AIDS with fewer partners or less sexual activity.
I have fewer partners. I'm more careful at who I pick as a partner. I slow down on my pace a lot.
Before, I may not have known somebody real well before I went to bed with them, and now I really date them and go to the movies or go to dinner or something like that.
According to 2 recent studies on homosexuality reported by the American Psychiatric Association, even if a homosexual has AIDS, he probably won't stop his compulsive sexual behavior. The majority of participants in both studies did not change their high-risk activities after learning they were infected with the virus. Abstinence is the primary method of preventing transmission of this fatal disease. Yet for many, an unquenchable sexual desire eliminates any moral integrity.
I know of many people who once diagnosed are still out there enjoying an evil life of sex. Sex is used to them as a way out, and it's not. It's a form of mass murder.
Since March 1985, a blood test for AIDS has been available to the general public. However, many homosexuals refuse to take the test, presumably fearful of testing positive. Today, hundreds of thousands of potential AIDS carriers continue sexual activity, passing the virus on to their partners.
Have you had the AIDS antibody test?
No, I haven't.
Have I? No, I haven't. My lover has, but I haven't.
I haven't had the test because there's no cure or there's no vaccine. So there's no logical reason to get a test.
I will not take the test for security reasons. I will not take the test.
I feel if we don't know whether we're negative or positive, since there's no cure, we won't worry ourselves to death. Worry and fear is the biggest killer.
Presently, something like 75% of the transmission of AIDS still is occurring in either intravenous drug users or in the homosexual populations. But there's an increasing amount of heterosexually transmitted AIDS.
And it's not just a problem for the gay community. It's a problem that is moving into the heterosexual community.
AIDS is transmitted in large measure through voluntary acts, particularly sexual acts. So in theory, at least, people can change their chances of being exposed to the AIDS virus. That by changing behavior, we really can affect the course of the epidemic.
I work on a college campus, and I have students who work for me. And I know that those kids are probably the most sexually active group in this country at that age. They are completely ignorant about how they can contract this, and they think it's someone else's problem.
In New York City, the biggest killer of women between the ages of 20 and 29 is AIDS. And that means they're getting it in high school and college.
The next highest risk group will be straight kids, not gay kids, straight kids. Middle America doesn't even know the time bomb that's sitting in, and if incubation is 7 years, potentially 7 years, the infection already happening in the young people it's already there.
It's not any group's disease. It'll affect mankind totally if we don't stop it.
It's a lethal viral infection. You don't want to become infected with this. You don't want to take any chance of being infected with this.
Heterosexuals have the opportunity that gay men and drug abusers never had, that is to anticipate the epidemic and to try to control it before it really becomes an overwhelming problem. I think if heterosexuals make no changes at all in their behavior, then ultimately this will become a major problem for them.
I think the American public has to wake up to the fact that the only thing that's going to make a difference is to begin changing a very permissive lifestyle that began developing in the 60s and carried through the 70s to the point that we are just doing anything we darn well please that pleases us.
In all probability, I developed the disease through having sexual contact in the 70s in basically free sex society, and my husband died with AIDS.
Dr. Judith Reisman explains that the promiscuous sexual activity today and its subsequent contribution to the AIDS epidemic can be traced directly to Kinsey's 1948 report on sexuality.
Alfred Kinsey was an insect specialist turned human sexuality researcher. He and his co-authors favored pansexuality. They actually had a pansexuality research bias. That is, they believed that all sexual activities were equally pleasurable and desirable. That included homosexuality, bisexuality, adult sex with children, anal and oral copulation, sex with animals, adultery, and so forth. The homosexual movement and those practicing homosexuality or believing in that and bisexuality use the theories of Kinsey to justify their way of life and the type of thing that they think is appropriate behavior.
As early as 1981, doctors knew of America's AIDS-infected blood banks. But due to procrastination from public health authorities, testing procedures were not implemented until 1985. During that period, more than 50,000 innocent hemophiliacs and blood transfusion recipients were unnecessarily sentenced to death. Doctors warned officials that the blood pollution was directly attributable to donations by IV drug users and homosexuals. Nevertheless, public health agencies failed to act for 3 reasons. First, there was the pressure from the homosexual community, which did not want to be discriminated against. Second, health officials did not want to alarm the public about the contaminated blood supply. And third, the blood industry did not want to pay to test the blood. It appears that political leaders and public health officials are far more concerned with appeasing the homosexual community and protecting the public's state of mind than protecting the public's health. Misleading information was routinely released in an attempt to curb the fear of AIDS. An example. Originally, AIDS had been broken into 3 categories. Those who had been, quote, exposed to the virus and were without symptoms, those with ARC, AIDS-related complex, and those with full-blown AIDS. All 3 categories mean that the patient is infectious and will eventually die. Yet, people diagnosed in the first 2 categories were told they might not be infectious and may never get AIDS. Hence, continued sexual activity was okay.
So there's no direct result that should be taken by any person who shows the antibody. Many people with the antibody in the bloodstream never develop AIDS.
Another example occurred in July 1983 when Health and Human Services Secretary Margaret Heckler stated, "I want to assure the American people that the blood supply is 100% safe." In addition, health care workers were assured the virus could not be passed to them from their AIDS patients. Today, unexplained transmission to health care workers is twice that of the general population. The AIDS virus is found not only in blood, but in semen, vaginal secretions, urine, perspiration, tears, saliva, and mother's milk. This fact, combined with public health officials' past record of misinformation, should prompt us to re-examine statements concerning the absolute safety of casual contact and insect transmission.
People are afraid that they walk down the street, they shake hands with friends, they share a glass that wasn't completely washed at a restaurant, and they could pick up the AIDS virus. All the studies presently show that that is virtually impossible. Casual contact does not seem to be a method of spreading the disease presently. My greatest fear, and the fear of any epidemiologist or any doctor who understands the spread of viruses and bacteria, is that the more prominent the virus is within our community, within society, the more people that have the disease, the more likely it is for them to spread it by any means, including casual contact.
It's known to have the ability to mutate extensively. And the fear of some of these researchers is that it would mutate to a form where it would be transmitted between humans through the respiratory system. Now, please don't misunderstand me. There's no proof today that it is transmissible through the respiratory system. I don't want to alarm somebody here. But the fear is that it could mutate to the point where it does, or is able to be transmitted through the respiratory system. And of course, that's what happened in the 14th century with the Black Plague.
If it goes airborne, everybody in this country is at risk. Men, women, children, no matter what age, no matter what. This is why I would say to support things now.
If it becomes respiratory borne, then we'll have extensive problems in our society, because the knowledge would be among all of us that continued social contact might result in the acquisition of the virus. You can obviously see that we can't function as a society at that point.
Now with safe sex, it's very important to make sure that you use condoms, to make sure that there's no exchange of bodily fluids.
I sit here almost appalled at the newspapers every day and these various headlines that talk to the issue of having safe sex. I think this whole issue of safe sex is indeed a myth. The idea that condoms are going to make it safe for us to continue to live highly promiscuous lives, I think is ridiculous.
San Francisco, whew. I've never seen so many hot men. It's like being a kid in a candy store. But being a gay kid isn't so simple anymore. It just doesn't seem like the fun it used to be. Those two over there don't seem very worried. And look at that guy. Bet he doesn't spend too many nights alone. Do these guys have some secret? How can they be so relaxed, so confident? What do they have that I don't have?
Rubbers! even condoms that are being touted these days as a means of having safe sex, well, studies are showing that perhaps up to 20% of these condoms may have a failure rate, and the virus can actually get through them.
This AIDS virus is so small that as many as 230 million of these little virus particles could rest on a period at the end of a sentence of normal type.
Condoms are not 100% safe. First of all, they may have holes in them. That is, some condoms are made out of latex types of plastics. And if they're not stored correctly, they dry out, they become friable and can break.
I remember the first time I tried to use a condom in a sexual act and it broke. This is common, as we all know. Anyone that's ever been used a condom knows that from time to time there is no safeguard whatsoever. If it cannot safeguard sperm, how is it going to safeguard some small little tiny virus?
A woman only has about 36 fertile days a year in which she can become pregnant, and condoms don't stop pregnancy in those 36 days, and yet you can get AIDS 365 days.
Condoms are not some foolproof method of making absolutely sure that you're not going to get something.
When the AIDS epidemic first struck, much of society was reluctant to help AIDS victims. Homosexual leaders stepped in, taking control of various government health agencies in the process. Because homosexuals do not consider their sexual behavior to be the root cause of the spread of AIDS, they have chosen to promote the use of condoms and enthusiastically further their lifestyle. Homosexual activists have diverted millions of taxpayer dollars away from AIDS research and hospice care to fund their pro-condom crusade.
In my travels, I've run into many opportunities where I need protection.
2 minutes, Jose.
The condom. Don't leave home without it.
Brought to you by the San Francisco AIDS Foundation.
We had to keep the lifestyle at any cost. While there was no such thing as safe sex, it's nothing more than some mode to try and hold on to the way things used to be.
Since the AIDS broke out, I do practice safe sex, and I think that's the cure right now.
I totally believe in safe sex and practice it myself.
Yes, I practice safe sex, yes.
Whether or not you're in a relationship, it's a good idea to practice safe sex because you don't know if your partner has been exposed or you yourself have been exposed in the many years that the virus has been around.
Safe sex, heterosexually and homosexually, and whatever sexually, just continue to have safe sex.
Be careful what you do and have fun.
A concerned public seeking information on AIDS prevention were directed to homosexually controlled AIDS information networks and presented with shocking literature showing unconventional sexual practices. Safe sex publications graphically depicted scenes of oral and anal sex, along with suggestions such as keeping your mouth closed while being urinated on by your sex partner.
A former employee of my office wrote me a letter about a week ago in which he described how he called the AIDS hotline in Washington, D.C., maintained by the U.S. Public Health Service. A counselor came on the line, and this counselor gave my former employee the name of a homosexual organization in New York City that you could contact for further information. And then this former employee received a ream of pornographic material advocating the homosexual lifestyle from that organization in New York City. And that organization received about $670,000 of U.S. taxpayers' money.
AIDS education is the kind of thing that sounds good to everyone. But what it really turns out to be in practice is large sums of money going to homosexual interest groups that exist for the primary purpose of promoting homosexual activity, or to organizations that are set up ad hoc and which consider it necessary to protect the legitimacy of homosexual practice. And as a matter of fact, much of the material that's being produced with federal funds that are supposed to be for AIDS education is what most of us would consider pornographic.
The rest of the world needs to look at the gay community to see how they've educated themselves and how they've been able to openly
talk about it, educate themselves, their friends, and learn from that.
Today, sex education programs for children recommend the practice of safe sex. Instruction books, such as this one for youngsters ages 1 to 10, teach the use of condoms as a method of AIDS prevention.
My interest, if you like to call it that, in the whole area of homosexuality in schools arose about 3 years ago when I wrote to the Inner London Educational Authority newspaper complaining in as gentle a terms as I could about its perpetual writing of articles about books on homosexuality, saying how suitable it was for young children. One of the most disturbing factors in the current AIDS epidemic, and at least we're beginning to admit that we're actually in the state of epidemic nature, is that the material that is being produced or advocated to try and combat the disease does not in any way include such ideas as chastity or celibacy as being an alternative to catching the disease. In fact, a lot of the material seems to be quite deliberately pornographic and advocating certain practices.
One of the problems is that most of the literature that's come out in this country has actually been encouraging people into some sort of homosexual or bisexual lifestyle, or indeed a heterosexual lifestyle. Nobody's actually said maybe promiscuity isn't helpful. Medically, historically and scientifically, that's been proven. The body is not made for promiscuity. And therefore we're doing the young people of our nation a great injustice by saying just because you've had a feeling, just because you've had an experience, you must fulfill it.
There's one particular disgusting little document which is produced by the Terence Higgins Trust, which just lists all, in sort of quite entertaining cartoon form, various types of homosexual activity, how to do it, propagating the concept that such interactive performance is fine and acceptable, and that these are the ways not to get AIDS. Basically, wear a condom and do what you like.
Despite a revealing report in June 1988 released by UCLA announcing the conclusive evidence of condom failure in preventing AIDS transmission, condoms are still being promoted today as safe. Taxpayer dollars supply condoms to gay and lesbian centers throughout the U.S. Hotel owners have been asked to include condoms in their rooms along with Gideon Bibles. And national TV commercials endeavoring to educate teens about condoms are actually encouraging them to experiment with sex.
I'm having the gentlemen that I go out with use rubbers.
One of the things to keep in mind with that is that the public health experts in our country who determine the whys and wherefores of disease have told us that there are ways to be sexual and avoid getting AIDS.
And if we can educate people to have safe sex, then that's how we're going to save our lives.
It's also not been shown that there's any been transmission from prostitutes to clients. We use condoms in an overwhelming percentage of the cases.
We don't know what we're dealing with here, and that's the way they say that you can protect yourself, so that's what I'm doing.
Every 13 seconds, a teen in America gets a sexually transmitted disease. By spring 1989, almost a quarter of the American AIDS population were in their 20s, indicating that these people contracted the virus when they were teenagers.
Now, obviously, the safest sex is to not have sex at all. I mean, really, the only completely safe sexual practice is probably a meaningful look.
Perhaps a more appropriate word would be something like smart sex, where you are actually intelligently weigh the situation and the potential benefits and the risks. And once a person will actually think about it, the best thing is to avoid sexual intercourse.
For myself, being a bisexual male, I don't think that any one person can offer me what I need.
I mean, and I can't keep count of everybody that I've been with the past 5 years, and who can, really? I mean, unless you've been married to the same person for 5 years. If you're a young person like I am going through college, you know, it's real tough to keep track of it and to keep track of who you've been with.
The best safe sex suggestion that I could give would be for people to avoid all sexual activity until marriage, and then once married, remain faithful for life. Since this concept is in the Bible, most people tend to dismiss it as old-fashioned, but never before has such a guideline been more relevant.
I think it's just another form of denial for our society to think that we as a culture, we as a people, we as human beings are going to be monogamous and that we're not going to have sex in light of AIDS, in light of this epidemic. What we have to do is educate people to have safe sex.
condoms are not the answer. There is no safe sex. And please, if you did anything for yourself, realize that the only thing that is going to stop the spread of this very deadly virus, it is celibacy.
I spoke to a high school group not too many months ago, and a young lady asked me a question. And the question was something like, I know that to not get disease or not get pregnant, that I should say no to sex. But what if I don't want to say no? And I took a couple of seconds as I thought that went through, and then all of a sudden it seemed to me that the proper response to her was, then I think you better be prepared to die. If you want to practice Russian roulette, you might just as well take a gun, because the consequences of being with the wrong partner at the wrong time are just about the same.
We're not really used to the idea that people in their 20s or 30s, people who are at the peak of their creativity and productivity, are going to be afflicted by fatal diseases. So suddenly we have to adjust to the idea that we're going to have a lot of 20, 30, 40-year-old people dying.
Those years are typically the most productive of one's life, and you are robbing society of valuable contributions from these people in many cases.
That's going to have an important economic and creative impact on this country.
I am here because I've had over 20 friends who are now dead as a result of AIDS.
All the people that gave me my support when I was diagnosed and sick, most of them have died. And it's totally unimaginable.
Some of our patients are a lot younger than me, and that is really hard to deal with when I'm seeing these young men dying that are 21.
In the United States alone, the fatalities from those already infected with AIDS will be more than double the combined total of American casualties from all the wars in U.S. history.
That's a profound loss to the infrastructure of our economic society.
And any disease that wipes out millions of people is essentially a devastating disease. It's devastating to the patients who get it. It is devastating to their community. It is certainly devastating to their family.
When you get AIDS, you don't simply drop over dead, but you are ill for long periods of time, which are very expensive in treatments and in hospital stays.
My drug bill for 1 month is $17,000. People can't keep paying that. That's tax money. You know, it costs me $4,000 a week to stay alive, and I can't.
The average cost of maintaining an AIDS patient's life is about $50,000 a year. I've already spent over $100,000 in just 3 months.
The economic impact is absolutely horrendous. The amount of money that's going to be needed to care for these people will literally bankrupt the United States, will bankrupt the healthcare system.
If we have 1 million people dying of AIDS in the next 4 or 5 years, which is possible, depending on a lot of probabilities, you multiply 1 million by 150,000, you're talking about $150 billion in the next 4 or 5 years.
That money and the cost to support what's going to happen in the future has got to come from someplace. And I don't think our American citizens are aware of just what the magnitude of these costs are going to be.
Frankly, we don't have that kind of money available in the public treasuries. People are up to their ears in taxes now as it is. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to start talking about alternative hospice care.
In 1986, Jim Johnson, a former homosexual, began Providence House in Long Beach, California, a pioneer project providing shelter and hospice care for homeless and unwanted individuals with AIDS. The need was so great that within 6 months, he opened 3 more houses. During the next 3 years, Jim and his small staff took care of, became friends with, and buried several hundred AIDS victims. As emotionally, physically, and financially draining as it was, Jim continued, his motivation stemming from his Christian faith in the Bible, which simply asked him to love and care for others. Providence House's fame spread internationally. Eventually, members of the homosexual community discovered that Jim was no longer a practicing homosexual, and Providence House came under attack. Homosexual critics were outraged by Jim's choice to leave the lifestyle and suggested that such a person was unsuitable to run the AIDS program. In their angry protest, they ignored the large number of grateful people who had been or were currently being cared for.
My father had heard about Jim Johnson and told me to give him a call. And I did. He was there within 20 minutes and brought me to the hospice. And since then, you wouldn't believe the change in me. I'm myself again. I feel fine. I've never felt better. And he literally saved my life. I don't know what I would have done if it had not been for him.
I had been down here about a month or two earlier, and I knew Jim. And I just got on the phone and I said, Jim, I've got this problem. I'm going to be out on the street. I need a place to stay. And he basically said, well, we're full up now, but come on down anyways, and we'll put you in somewhere.
They always knew when we had just reached the point where we just needed comfort too. They were always there with love and attention. And it was, I don't know, I still come back.
Phony allegations of unsanitary conditions at Providence House were leaked to the liberal press by homosexual activists. Funding and donations were cut off, and despite an overwhelming demand for its services, Providence House was forced to close. Why would the homosexual leaders destroy a hospice that provided the necessary care that benefits dying homosexuals? It appears that anyone who believes or demonstrates that it is possible to change homosexual behavior is a threat to the homosexual political movement.
Now education is trying to insist that men and women are born homosexual. There simply is no such evidence. This has become a well-propagated myth, which is at the root of the homosexual rights movement. Historical and biblical evidence indicate the behavior is chosen and unnatural. Any homosexual being truly honest will acknowledge that at some point in time they chose the homosexual lifestyle.
It is not any more possible for me to change into a heterosexual than it is for any heterosexual to suddenly decide that they were going to turn into a homosexual.
It's not your quote-unquote normal way to be, but homosexuality has been around for as long as time has been around.
We are moving to a consciousness where we cannot pretend to be something we aren't anymore.
Homosexuality is no different than having brown eyes. It's the way you're made.
I always pretty much knew that I was gay.
Give me an H! Give me an O! Give me an M! Give me an O! What's it spell?
The only way to really educate people about sexuality is to take a non-judgmental stance in which others are not judged for having values and behaviors that may be different from yours.
For far too long, far too many of us have accepted the shame that society has put on us.
I don't personally feel like there's anything wrong with being gay. To me, it's a sexual preference.
You will never, ever get us to go back to the closet ever again. On this day, millions of Americans are burning those closets down.
Homosexuality appears to be a lifestyle of choice. Most individuals that I've had contact with who have proclaimed themselves to be homosexual found that that particular sexual lifestyle was very exciting for them, and they chose to continue into that.
I'm not sure that there is enough research to prove whether or not a person is born with genetic proclivities toward being gay. As a person with a psychological background, I know for me it was a choice that I made around 30.
We have drunk of the cup of true emotions, of honest love, and of warm friendship. And we have found it to be a pleasurable life.
You know, maybe it's a natural form of birth control. Who knows? I mean, if everybody was making babies, what would we do then, right?
The yin and the yang, the yes and the no. You can't have one without the other. Heterosexuality is to populate the world. Homosexuality is to control the population.
In 1948, I conceived the idea of a gay discussion group, and it took me 2 years to find my first recruit. 3 months later, I found 3 more people, and we began. It's a long haul from 1950 to now.
The wonderful thing about the gay and lesbian community is we're teaching the heterosexual community how men and women can really love each other.
Homosexuality tends to be very compulsive, whether it's at an emotional level or emotional and sexual or just plain sexual level. It's very compulsive, very controlling. So, like I said, it could range anywhere from mutual masturbation all the way up to defecating on one another.
There's nothing sickening about love. There's nothing not normal about love. And what we need to do is start demonstrating that loud and clear.
So get ready, America. Get ready, America. We are coming forward in ever-increasing numbers. We have become a tide of strength. Do not stand in our way.
The device of uniting people against a common enemy has always been an effective political ploy, one which the homosexual leadership uses successfully to strengthen its ranks against 2 chosen enemies, the U.S. government and traditional religion.
To the U.S. government, we say shame, 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 shame.
We are really having to fight a system that definitely wants to kill us.
It's as if it were a form of genocide. It's like they would like to see us go.
Supreme Court, no way. Racist, sexist, anti-gay. Supreme Court, no way. Racist, sexist, anti-gay.
The political right, in terms of homophobia, have used everybody's fear and disdain and hatred of gay people to attack the gay civil rights movement. And now, of course, they're using the fear of disease.
Not the church, not the state. We alone decide our fate. Not the church, not the state. We alone decide our fate.
The church and religion is the main cause of discrimination against gays and lesbians.
I think the religious right is very much our enemy.
Yesterday I had a run-in with a group of fundamentalists, and I loved every minute of it. I am so tired of that group telling us we're going to die and go to hell.
The strongest critics are the fundamentalists. They're the ones that hate us the most and would give us the most difficulty. That's why we're seeking legal recognition.
I've made up my mind. I don't care what the religious right wing think about us anymore. I'm going to live my life.
The Bible declares that God loves the sinner, but not the sin, and defines homosexual behavior as sin. Homosexuals do not choose to recognize this fundamental Christian morality, but instead redefine biblical mandates in the hopes of maintaining a type of religiosity. Many churches have succumbed to homosexual propaganda and today endorse homosexual behavior.
We have a third of the bishops of the Episcopal Church who are now ordaining knowingly homosexuals and lesbians. The United Church of Christ in America ordains knowingly homosexuals and lesbians. I could go through the list. I'm delighted to say that Metropolitan Community Church started out of a revelation that God gave me, that God loves gay people. We now have over 267 churches in 11 countries preaching the good news of Jesus Christ to gays and lesbians, that God loves them and they can be the people God wants them to be.
Yes, Jesus loves me, the Bible tells me so.
The church has to respond more, recognize homosexuality and the gay and lesbian people as an equal part of the church.
The only people who discriminate against us are people who usually are very ignorant on the subject and haven't read Scripture.
Amen. 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 Amen.
And yes, Yes, I've read Romans 1:26 through 28, 1 Corinthians 6:9, 1 Timothy 1:9 and 10. And the Apostle Paul concerned himself with phallic cults that existed in his time period and temple prostitution. That was the condemnation that Paul talked about, not homosexuality, not loving relationships as we have them today.
Most of the people in gay lifestyle take it for granted that homosexual activity is something that is born into them, and therefore because it was born into them, it is blessed by God. I've never seen more cunning twisting of the scriptures than in the, quote, gay theology.
We had to twist the scriptures in order to justify our lifestyle. We literally created our own theology. Today, the homosexual movement is pressuring traditional churches to do the same. In addition, this recent report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services blames traditional religion for gay youth suicides and demands that Christians in particular accept homosexual behavior as normal. It even suggests that those who refuse to alter their theology should be punished by the law.
I know so many, myself personally, many children of ministers that are gay. In fact, when I went to school, the people that had the most active sex lives were the children of preachers, because once they got away from home, they had a chance to express themselves.
Being gay is an ability to love, and I believe all ability to love ultimately comes from God. And so therefore it's a gift from God, and a gift that I've chosen to accept.
We believe that our relationship is sanctioned by God, and that's enough justification for us.
My sex life, I'm in a relationship and have been for 4 years with a man I love very much who's very involved in the church himself, also was trained for the ministry as I was.
Why didn't make me gay? God made me gay.
He lives within my heart.
In October 1987, more than 250,000 homosexuals marched in Washington, D.C. Pretending to focus their crusade against the AIDS epidemic, homosexual organizers shamelessly used AIDS victims to attract public sympathy and media coverage for the purpose of promoting their agenda, which is to change laws that constrain homosexual behavior, ignoring that it is precisely this behavior which induced the AIDS epidemic in the first place. Homosexual activists, many of whom were dying of AIDS themselves, boisterously protested the right to legally indulge in their lifestyle.
Right now, the homosexual movement is one of the wealthiest, most powerful political movements there is. The AIDS crisis, instead of hurting their cause, has given them millions of federal, state, and local taxpayer dollars. Homosexuals now have the power to go into our schools and, under the pretense of AIDS education, present homosexuality as a normal, healthy, alternative lifestyle to our children. They are being put in charge of AIDS commissions, again using their position not to stop AIDS, but to promote its anti-family, pro-homosexual agenda.
The march is a very important statement to the American public about the power and the strength of lesbian gay people in America.
The only way you can grow, acquire a sense of individualism, a sense of pride in yourself, is to assert yourself. And one way to do that is to be politically active and go out there and get what you need to be a human being and demand that of others.
The goal of the organized male homosexual society in America is to change our cultural, moral values so that all of us will accept and equate the homosexual lifestyle on a par with the heterosexual lifestyle. That's their goal. And quite candidly, they have made significant steps in that direction in the last 20 years as a part of the sexual revolution in America.
They see this AIDS epidemic now as being able to strengthen their position. They're using it to push for some of the political activities that they've been pushing for years, particularly gay rights. They're trying to make this appear to be a normal and healthy lifestyle by legislating it. And unfortunately, all that we know about the lifestyle is unhealthy. Those in the infectious disease areas know that homosexuality spreads hepatitis B, venereal diseases, and AIDS. So we cannot say that this is a normal, healthy lifestyle, no matter how active they get politically.
Respect for our rights and the right to be treated with human dignity is only going to come about through legislative and political action in the courts and the legislatures and with the executive.
They want the law to say that homosexual practice is legitimate and that opposition to homosexuality is illegitimate. That means they want homosexuality considered a category for civil rights protection. They want the legitimation of homosexual marriages.
It's a very satisfying feeling to be able to marry the woman that I love and to be able to call her my wife.
And ours is a marriage in the truest sense of the word.
We wanted to dramatize the issue of domestic partnerships related to medical, insurance, property issues, the same rights and civil rights that non-gay people have.
They want to make sure that that homosexuals are allowed in the military and in the teaching professions, and that they're allowed to adopt children. They want to make sure that our schools teach that that homosexuality is an equally valid style of life as getting married and having children.
We want our marriage and our relationship recognized. We want to adopt children and have both our names on the adoption form.
We demand the elimination of discrimination against same-sex couples, with particular attention to taxes, insurance, medical care, survivor benefits, foster care, adoption, child custody, and visitation rights.
I feel that they need to change the sodomy laws. This is what we're striving for, to change sodomy laws, to be able to show our sexuality in public.
We demand the repeal of all laws making sodomy between consenting adults a crime.
We are determined to keep a coalition together and to grow and to grow and to grow until justice is ours.
The government does not respond. We are going to make the government respond.
We are here because we have had enough. We are here because we are powerful.
We are here, straight America. We are here to tell you that it is you who should now be afraid of us. Do you understand that you have backed us into a corner and that we are ready, willing, and able to come out fighting? We are mad as hell, and we are not going to take it anymore.
No more, we're not going to take it anymore. We're standing up and we're coming out and we're voicing our concerns, and you need to listen to us.
If by the mere force of numbers, a majority should deprive a minority of any written constitutional right, it might, in a moral view, justify revolution. It's
An overthrow is bound to happen. The people will prevail.
I will do whatever I have to do to stay free, including violence, including destroying property, and God forbid, and I hate putting it on camera, if it's a choice between me staying alive and free and somebody else not staying alive, I'm willing to make that choice too.
We are here to warn. Make no mistake about it. Our patience has been exhausted.
Bigots! Bigots! Bigots gotta go! Bigots! Bigots! Bigots gotta go!
I'll fight back, and I know of many other people who will fight back, who even now possess arms for this purpose.
Bigots! Bigots! Bigots gotta go! Bigots! Bigots! Bigots gotta go!
And make no mistake about it, we will not stop until we have achieved our freedom, our justice, and our pursuit of happiness.
As a community, in general, we are an incredibly peace-loving community, and we're being forced to reevaluate that.
is at the verge of the bursting point. People are dying and they're prepared to do anything. Very many people have nothing to lose anymore. The primary goal of militant homosexuals is to promote their lifestyle regardless of the implication to public health.
Paul, I want to thank you and congratulate you for everything you do with the National AIDS Network.
Ironically, these same homosexuals are being appointed to positions of authority over federal, state, and local commissions to stop the spread of AIDS.
In our battle against AIDS. Thank you. We'll march together. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
To date, they have successfully hindered the implementation of standard public health measures which protect citizens from epidemics. Robert Schwab, homosexual activist and former president of the Texas Human Rights Foundation, threatened, "If research money for AIDS is not coming at a certain level by a certain date, all gay males should give blood. Whatever action is required to get national attention is valid. If that includes blood terrorism, so be it." Larry Kramer, homosexual and internationally known playwright, suggests that as homosexuals, we have to scare people. We should throw bombs. We should set fires.
The politicalization of this issue has arisen over the failure of public health officials in America to report those with the virus to public health authorities.
Quit dealing with the AIDS issue as though we're dealing with a civil rights issue. We are first and foremost dealing with a public health issue. We have a communicable disease. We have a communicable disease that has deadly consequences to anybody that gets it. And we ought to be at least imposing the normal types of tracking mechanisms that we have in place all over this country for stopping other kinds of communicable diseases.
We have no other means of controlling the disease, controlling this contagious process, except by the fact that we know who has it, who can spread it.
And we have this reportability in our law for three reasons. One, to gather statistical information on the size of the problem. Secondly, to cure it if we can. Third, to prevent the transmissibility to other people.
I fear as well that there will be no containing of the AIDS virus without some of these public health laws, without the ability to test and report, talk to contacts and say, you may be, let's get tested. Without that, the spread could be exponential, as many people have predicted.
As a result of political manipulation by homosexual leaders, people with AIDS who have knowingly infected others go unprosecuted, while doctors in some states who simply tell their nurses that a patient has AIDS is subject to prosecution.
Let's not kid ourselves. We're dealing with the first politically protected disease in the history of the country. We're not reporting a person with a non-curable communicable venereal disease. At the same time, we are reporting a person with a curable communicable venereal disease. That's idiotic. Public health officials can't defend that.
There is not confidence out in the general public that the government is doing everything it can to tell the truth about AIDS and to stop the spread of this disease. I mean, how can you seriously claim you're stopping the spread of AIDS if you're not even testing people to find out who has the disease?
Polls show the American public is far ahead of the elected political leadership on this issue, that is, to treat it as a public health issue. But the activists in the male homosexual community have intimidated public health officials from taking the action that they should, that I've described, and that should be corrected and can be corrected through the assertion of public pressure through citizens contacting their legislators.
People are not confident they've been told the truth because they can see that government is not doing what it needs to do to protect their families from getting AIDS. They're really convinced that somebody's hiding something, and they're hiding things for the benefit of protecting themselves from accusations of homophobia.
The male homosexual community is a highly organized, politically potent force in our society. It has reached the point where if you are a serious candidate for city council in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York City, which those three cities essentially have 53% of the AIDS cases in America, you want to get elected in any one of those cities to public office, your chances of winning are pretty much related to the extent to which you have made your peace with the homosexual community. That is, you have signed on to support their agenda.
If they won't take the steps, hopefully enough of us will get together, get them out of there, and put people in who will take the steps.
There are a great number of office holders who owe their political positions to the homosexual rights movement. and really can't do anything that would upset that movement. We can see them behaving in Congress. We know who they are.
These people have shown the courage and led the way. Yeah, let's hear what we think of them.
They do anything that the gay rights movement tells them because their political careers depend on these people.
Many concerned citizens and celebrities anxious to lend their support to the fight against AIDS unwittingly are endorsing the homosexual agenda, which demands the legalization and acceptance of all kinds of deviant sexual behavior, including prostitution and sadomasochism.
S&M is two people consensually saying, I want this to happen. The other one says, okay, I'll have that happen. That's what it is. Two people agreeing. It's not one saying, I'm going to beat you, and the other one saying, no, no, no. The other one is saying, yes, yes, yes.
The pain is real, but it is pleasurable because it is a sexual excitement.
We do a lot of bondage, I guess, with tying rope, chains, leather straps. We do some whipping.
We use rope, we use chains, we use whips, just like the people sort of make jokes about, but we use them in ways that bring people closer together rather than move people further apart.
A paddle is basically used in the rear end area. Okay, crops and some of the other things can be used in a lot of the other areas. You can use this, for example, also on the thighs and that.
But anything that you can find in a hardware store, we know how to play with real well.
We'll have seminars and they'll discuss different techniques, say in using whips, using rope, bondage, using saran wrap, using tape. It goes on and on and on. There's cutting involved, piercing, the whole shot.
So S&M has an enormous number of possibilities that way. If it's just a matter of playing out fantasies of daddy and his boy, or whatever kind of dream that you would like to be, it's a safe world where you can do it.
This is a pair of ankle restraints. These are used in bondage once again. It's a way of holding the victim.
There are SM parties where there's a dungeon set up with all kinds of equipment, bondage tables. I've seen boots that you get yourself strapped in a pair of boots and they're hanging on a board and pull you right up with a pulley and a rope and hang you from the board for a while and carry on from there.
We've begun to realize that there is no right or wrong.
Everybody in San Francisco that I knew was getting into this S&M. It was like a spiral funnel. I mean, everybody was gravitating towards this intense sex. When I first moved to the city, I was very naive about this, but after a couple of years, after I'd seen these things happen in bathhouses and stuff, it just gave me the creeps. After a while, I knew this was abnormal.
A lot of people that you don't even realize that are in your own community are into different forms of SM.
And we have lawyers and doctors and talent agents and unemployed people and rich people and poor people. SM is a wonderfully growing movement. We like to think of this March on Washington and our participation in it as a beginning for us. This is the first time that a coalition of gay and lesbian groups has asked us to participate in a leadership role.
I want to welcome all minorities, including leather groups, including transsexuals, including transvestites and bisexuals. For today we drop all differences. Today we join together as one.
Also represented in the lesbian and gay rights struggle is an organization called NAMBLA. Founded in 1978, the North American Man-Boy Love Association may soon change its name to include all adult sex with children. NAMBLA affirms that sexual intimacy can be an appropriate expression of the loving relationship between parent and child, between siblings, and between adult friends of young children.
You find that local boys become friends with you if you express an interest in them. You treat them as friends, individuals. If you gain their respect, then there's more chance of you establishing a relationship that has a sexual element to it.
In a desire to legalize sex with children, NAMBLA has proposed first changing the age of consent to 13, then eliminating the age of consent law altogether. They maintain that if an adult could have sex with a child, the adult's possibility of acquiring AIDS would be greatly reduced if not eliminated. We should not fear the AIDS issue. It should be our strongest argument. Isn't it about time we fought for our youth? The time to go on the offensive has begun. This fighting for our youth is now in full swing through efforts of numerous homosexual PTAs and gay fathers organizations.
We are proud, we are gay, we are in the PTA. We are proud, we are gay, we are in the PTA.
Project 10, already in progress in California schools, is a sex education program presented by homosexuals and lesbians. They teach children how to pursue homosexuality as a normal alternative. Students are instructed not to discuss the program with their parents.
So we shouldn't be particularly surprised when a young man beginning to experience his human sexuality in those years opts to pursue a homosexual lifestyle. Our culture has really said to him, it's okay.
You've got to inform the public that there are gay teachers and that we're out here to educate them and make the world more harmonious.
We project the voice of freedom forward beyond ourselves to the youth of today and to the generations of tomorrow. Do you understand, America, that 12% of the little boys and girls growing up today are going to be lesbians and gays, and they are not going to be called faggot and dyke and queer and sissy? We are going to save our children!
The unanimous conclusion of both the heterosexual and homosexual is that the AIDS epidemic is going to get far worse.
It's only going to get worse. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's not just a gay disease. It's a disease that is going to destroy mankind unless something is done about it.
We're talking about hundreds of millions of people dying all over this globe within the next 20 to 30 years if a cure is not found and if a vaccine is not made available.
The tragedy is about AIDS that by the time the nations wake up to it and want to do something about it, they're going to find that literally millions of people throughout the nations will be on their deathbeds, and the program for building hospices, for educating young people, not for safer sex, but a completely different lifestyle, is going to be far, far too late.
If we don't ask that question and face the reality of the consequences of not taking steps to control the epidemic, we could be spelling the end of our civilization.
I used to think that I didn't care if I stopped existing when I died, and I didn't want to believe in hell, but now I definitely want to believe in a life after death. I mean, those kind of thoughts are something that terminal patients of all kinds think about every day.
If the AIDS disease isn't checked, if behaviour isn't changed, within a very few short years, there will not be a family left in the major nations of the world who do not know of a son or a daughter or a friend or a next-door neighbour or a school chum who has died of AIDS. And it may actually take that terrible scenario to wake a nation up.
The world can no longer afford to protect a homosexual or promiscuous lifestyle at the expense of millions of lives. Standard epidemic control measures must begin immediately. Books and videos educating people about AIDS that are not influenced by homosexual activists should be circulated to families, churches, educational facilities, and other interest groups. People wishing to help AIDS victims without promoting the homosexual agenda can also fund and participate in their own AIDS hospice programs.
Churches themselves can make a response by funding various Christian initiatives with AIDS, by funding a massive hospice movement throughout the country, throughout the nation, so that we are continually demonstrating that we care. We're not merely moralising. We do believe there's a better way to live than this. We do believe that promiscuity leads to this sort of thing, but we're demonstrating our care and we're demonstrating our love.
After I contracted AIDS, my family deserted me.
I had a number of friends that have turned away from me, and I've had family that's turned away from me. And that's the part that hurts the most.
Just as Jesus was dealing with lepers, he obviously knew how leprosy was spread. We, in the same vein, need to not shy away from touching these people, being compassionate, showing our love, but again, protecting ourselves from the disease, from the process, from the secretions that could potentially pass the AIDS virus to ourselves or our families.
I would really encourage people to look at the scriptures of how Jesus cared about the leper, and to reach out with the same compassion, and to not be worried about their own health and safety so much as the soul of that individual.
How many things do we do in our past when looked at with that good old 20/20 hindsight would we like to change? Growing up in an alcoholic home, being very distant from my father and dominated by my mom, and resisting it all the while, living a very rebellious life as a teenager. I was still looking for adult affirmation. And one day when I was driving back home, I spotted a man who was obviously gay, and he was just flirting as hard as he could, and I felt very flattered. And I picked him up and drove over to his house and met a whole bunch of other guys, and they all seemed very witty and charming and fun, and not like a bunch of dullards I went to school with. And they all liked me, and at least I thought they liked me. Obviously, they wanted me for other reasons. But I appreciated it. And that's when I really first started getting caught up in the gay, the homosexual lifestyle. And all the while, it was like I was filling a square hole with a round peg. And you know, when you do that, there's always a little left over in the edges, right? So you're never quite filled. And so I got very promiscuous. I would go to bookstores. I would go to bathhouses. I would meet guys at bars and go home with them. I eventually got into prostitution and hustling because I was so unhappy. I figured I might as well be making money off of this. It was all becoming an act for me. And the drugs helped me to go through the whole act and do all that kind of stuff. The final moment came one afternoon when I was reading the New Testament, and I was just caught up with tears of joy. And all of a sudden, I just knew that Christ was the answer to fill the holes in my life. I knew then that the way I had been living wasn't going to fulfill my needs. It wasn't right before God, and it wasn't right for me. And I wanted to change. Well, I called back 2 weeks later and got my doctor on the phone, and he told me, "Son, I'm really sorry to have to inform you of this, that the tests turned out positive for Kaposi sarcoma." And of course I knew what that meant. I knew that meant I had AIDS. And I learned then that, we're not necessarily freed from the consequences of our sin. The Lord may put our name down in the Lamb's Book of Life, but we still have to live with the consequences.
There's a lot that each of us can do to help in this AIDS epidemic. The producers of this film are making available to you an AIDS action packet that outlines 1. How you and your family can avoid AIDS. 2. How you as an individual or group can assist AIDS victims. 3. How you can keep your taxes from being used to promote the homosexual agenda. 4. How you can help change laws in order to protect healthcare workers and other public servants. 5. How parents can protect their school children from homosexual influence in education. And 6. How Christians and their churches must exercise a loving biblical approach to homosexuality and the AIDS epidemic. For this and other up-to-date information, please send $3 to AIDS Action Packet, P.O. Box 1800, Hemet, California 92343.